working? Yes, it is working. Thank you. Okay, good morning still, everyone. I'm Harvey Miller. I'm the director of the Center for Urban Regional Analysis here at Ohio State, and I welcome you to our third event of the semester on the topic of food security and healthy communities. It's been a terrific series, as those of you who have been here for the entire series can attest to, and we're going to wind up with a really excellent panel featuring people from working in this area from across Ohio, from Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Dayton. Before I introduce our panel, I want to talk a little bit about what's happening next semester, fall 2020. We've already lined up a great series of events for fall. Our theme in the fall will be strengthening legacy cities in Ohio and beyond. And we have, I think these dates are set. Katie will always correct me if she can. On September 11th, we have Alan Malik, who's author of the recent book, Divided City, Poverty and Prosperity in Urban America. It's an excellent book. I recommend reading it. He'll be speaking on September 11th. And then I think November 6th is our other panel, right? Yeah, November 6th, we're having a panel discussion, Opportunities and Challenges Facing Ohio Cities. And that's going to feature Jason Szigeti, who's the Director of Planning and Urban Development for the City of Akron, Ian Beniston, the Executive Director of the Youngstown Neighborhood Development Corporation, Allison Goebel, the Executive Director of the Great Ohio Policy Center, and Anthony Richardson, Executive Director of the Nord Family Foundation in Lorain. And that'll just be one panel discussion next fall, November 6th. And finally, we're finalizing the contract with a third speaker, a pretty big name speaker. That's why we actually have a speaking contract with this person. I won't say who it is until it's finalized, but I will say that this is a very well-known person who's an author and advocate for stronger neighborhoods and communities. So that's what we have lined up already for fall semester 2020. So like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Go to our website, cura.osu.edu, and you can sign up for our newsletter, and you'll never miss any of the exciting events happening here in Cura. So today we're going to talk about what's happening in Ohio when it comes to food security and healthy communities. And I'm going to introduce our panelists in the order in which they'll be giving their opening remarks. These are representatives from the cities of Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Dayton. First of all, from the Rid All Green Partnership, we have Mark White. Mark is he's a fashion designer, humanitarian, regenerative specialist. I haven't heard that before.
Regenerative.
Yeah, regenerative specialist. But, sorry about that, but that's interesting. What does that mean exactly?
That means that we help regenerate or resuscitate living things.
Okay, very good. Okay, let me continue. As a student of life and the first African-American male graduate of Kent State School of Fashion in the mid-1980s, I'm also graduated Kent State University. Go Flashes, right? Mark has spent his career drawing inspiration from nature and the creation, to form his unique design aesthetic. He has a philosophical tradition of traditional clothing and culture that translates into completely modern, pleasing, and covetable wear. And he's directed these attentions to design towards this green partnership, which you'll hear about in just a few minutes. Representing Green Umbrella is Michaela Oldfield. She's director of the Greater Cincinnati Food Policy Council and Green Umbrella Regional Sustainability Alliance. Michaela has a PhD in Community Agriculture, Recreation, and Resource Studies from Michigan State University, and also has a JD from the University of Michigan. We still accept her here. As a graduate student, Michaela studied the politics of Food Safety Modernization Act, and ways public and private sector actors shape policies affecting the food system. And she'll be representing today the Green Umbrella Partnership. Number 3 will be Alan White. He's Community and School Forest Garden Liaison for the University of Cincinnati and the Christ College of Nursing and Health Sciences. He's an assistant professor in the Christ College of Nursing and Health Sciences and the School and Community Garden Liaison for Cincinnati. I just said that. Alan works with communities and schools to plant edible forest gardens. His research and advocacy agendas focus on raising people's food and ecological consciousness via dialogues about the personal health, economic, and larger ecological implications of our food system. And finally, from Dayton is Nicole Wasmuth. She's from the Hall Hunger Initiative. Nicole is a registered nurse serving her second year as AmeriCorps Vista with the Hall Hunger Initiative. As an RN, she specializes in access to healthy food. And she realizes, access to healthy food plays a big role in chronic disease development and management. As co-chair of the Strong Communities branch of the Food Equity Coalition, Nicole continues to be a resource for community outreach, education, and local organization capacity building. Hall Hunger Initiative facilitates the racial wealth gap simulation as an educational opportunity for understanding historical policy, which has led to the vast disparities we see today. So that's our panel representing the breadth of Ohio, and we'll start with our first presentation, please.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes, thank you. Again, as I said, my name is Mark White. I'm actually one of the founding partners and director of Regenerative Health at Red Olive Green Partnership. I also manage the daily workings in and outs of our facility in Cleveland, Ohio, our urban farm. So we are an urban farm. We specialize in urban agriculture and youth education. Okay, we basically are situated in the area of Ohio that's one of the worst, and I say one of the worst in terms of food insecurity. Okay, there is a huge disparity of life expectancy there. There's actually a 29-year disparity of life expectancy between the people who live in that community and those that live less than 8 miles away. So again, all these things are due to this being a huge food desert, and at the same time, understand that people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, also destroyed for lack of access and a lack of the application of good healthy practices. And so what we try to do at Red Olive is to provide people with access to, prepare food better and ways in which they can curb their diet and create ways in which they can regenerate themselves. What goes along with that, with those disparities in that community, are several diseases. Again, we're like #1 on like every disease list, Big 10. Cancer, diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, all of these things. And we found that by having people create small changes in their lifestyle, that they're actually able to mitigate their diseases and find themselves improving their health and their wellness. Finding that the foundation of a lot of these problems emanate from inflammation. Understanding the inflammation is coming from over-acidification of the body, that we promote alkalinity. We promote people alkalining their diet, alkalining what they ingest, and we have several hands-on type of programs at Red Olive. I want to move through this a little bit. I do know we are at the times of the time today. As you see, here we kind of collage. I kind of collage my presentation together. I don't want to have that a few minutes. But as you see, Red Olive Green Partnership being a platform for regenerative community development. And in that, see, we say to people all the time that at Red Olive, we don't just grow fruits and vegetables. Thank you. We don't just grow fruits and vegetables, we grow relationships. And not just between people, but between people and their food. We say all the time that if we're going to be living on this earth, and we do plan to live on earth, that we have to have a good relationship with food. Friends come and go, family come and go, but you and food going to be here. If you're going to be living, you and food have to have a relationship. And for many of the people who reside in the community that I spoke about, the relationship with food is very, very bad. And so we try to bring in teachers, counselors, leaders, various ones that try to help inspire the people. But we found that by doing small hands-on classes, for instance, a class we call Soul Vegan Saturday, is an opportunity for local community members to come in who never eat anything vegan, that really don't even know what that really means per se. But they do know that they have emerging health problems. They found that by integrating at least maybe one day into their diet of eating vegan, that they're able to mitigate some of the issues and problems that they were having. And so the whole thing was not to make everybody vegan, but to create options for people, to give them alternative ways in which they can eat, in ways in which they can act, that can help with their life and their lifestyle. Stabilizing climate, regenerating cities, Cleveland's potential as a global climate leader. And so we tell people all the time, it's hard to look at this situation without looking at it through the lens of global warming or global crisis. And I say that because it's truth that every year we experience changes. And if we're not set up to change with those changes, then we'll be caught and we'll lose. And so there's a concept, I don't know if many of you are aware, there's a concept called the heat island effect. Are we aware of this? It's saying here that extreme heat kills hundreds of people in the U.S. every year, more than any other hazardous weather event, including hurricanes, tornadoes, and flooding. According to the Center for Disease Control, heat waves have been occurring more frequently since the mid-20th century and are expected to become more common, more severe, and longer lasting due to the climate crisis. Now, everything is affected by the climate crisis. The way we eat, the way we plan our food, the way we access our services and our goods. Within the same cities, however, exposure to extreme heat is unequal. Temperatures in different neighborhoods, even within the same city, can vary by 20 degrees Fahrenheit. It's mostly lower income households and communities of color who live in these urban heat islands, which have historically had fewer green spaces and tree canopy and more concrete and pavements, and thus are less equipped to cope with the mounting effects of global heating. So these are issues that we're dealing with. It's one thing to be hungry, but it's something else to be hot and hungry, right? Or like I say, hangry. Have you ever experienced that? You understand. Okay. Moving on here. What is food insecurity? In 2008, an estimated 1 in 9 Americans were food insecure, equating to over 37 million Americans, including more than 11 million children. And see, that's a shame because children don't deserve that. You know, when you consider that, you know, children need to be taught and they need to grow up in the world. And this is a beautiful quote that I like to often refer to. It says, children deserve to be educated in a way that allows them to fall in love with their natural world. They will surely take care of a world that they fall in love with. And if we're concerned about how the generations matriculate and how we ascend and how we evolve and how we morph, we have to start at the beginning. Childhood is sacred. You know, this is why I love Greta. You all know about Greta, right? Our Nobel Peace Prize winner. And how she referred to, in reference at a UN meeting about 3 or 4 years ago, he said, can you all please just leave us something? All the resources are gone. Everything is going. We have nothing left to build on. So it was a plea for that generation to leave, for that generation to ask of our generation to please leave us something to build on. And these are the things that we're understanding. It's becoming more and more food insecure. As we look, it's not a very, very promising future ahead concerning this, except that we make certain changes and that we have some of the solutions to these problems. The U.S. Department of Agriculture defines food insecurity as a lack of consistent access to enough food for an active, healthy life. It is important to know that though hunger and food insecurity are closely related, they are distinct concepts. Hunger refers to a personal physical sensation of discomfort, while food insecurity refers to a lack of available financial resources for food at the household level. Do we realize that? Extensive research reveals food insecurity is a complex problem. Many people do not have the resources to meet their basic needs. Challenges in which increase a family's risk of food insecurity. Though food insecurity is closely related to poverty, not all people living below the poverty line experience food insecurity, and people living above the poverty line can experience food insecurity. But food insecurity does not exist in isolation, as low-income families are affected by multiple overlapping issues like lack of affordable housing, social isolation, chronic or acute health problems, high medical costs, and low wages. Taken together, these issues are important social determinants of health, defined as the conditions in the environments in which people are born, live, learn, work, play, worship, and age that affect a wide range of health, functioning, and quality of life, outcomes, and risks. Effective responses to food insecurity must address the overlapping challenges posed by the social determinants of health, hunger, and health, explores the impact of food insecurity as a social determinant of health and its effect on individuals and population health outcomes. These things are very important. And we try to consistently show and demonstrate through our workshop classes and through our engagement in the community how people can become more food secure. But first you have to understand which category you're in. And those who reside in our community are always seemingly on the lowest part of this spectrum. What determines high food security? Households that had no problems or anxiety about consistently accessing adequate food. Okay, who does that fit in the room? Most of us, right? Okay, households, marginal food security. Households that had problems or anxiety at times about accessing adequate food, but the quality, variety, and quantity of their food were not sustainably reduced. Okay? That's another category that I'm sure is in this room. Households low food security column. Households reduced the quality, variety, and desirability of their diets, but the quantity of food intake and normal eating patterns were not substantially disrupted. Okay? What does that sound like? Sound kind of like college students, certain kind of way, a little bit. You eat, but maybe not what you want to eat, but you eat, right? Okay. Very, very low food security. At times during the year, eating patterns of one or more household members were disrupted and food intake reduced because the household lacked money or other resources for food. Now again, where we reside, this is the category most of our people fit. And unfortunately, this becomes the issue, except that they have better ways of accessing food and accessing more healthier choices. Okay, as I said, at Red All Green Partnership, we grow a lot of food. Although we do grow a lot of relationships, we grow a lot of food. And in growing the food, we are able to show people how to grow one throughout the year. We can grow 12 months of the year in our hoop house situations. So we actually create ways in which to grow food in inclement weather conditions. Also, we're able to, we have a retractable sides and roofs on our hoop houses where we're able to open up during the summer months when it's very, very hot and grow within as well. So we switch out the various crops that we grow. And even throughout the winter, even like right now, we're growing mainly cruciferous vegetables. Those in the green family, those that have a high sulfur content. So your broccoli, your collard greens, your cabbage, your kale, things of that nature. They grow very well in the winter. So we just harvested, even yesterday, a lot of greens. And people don't realize that you can actually grow your greens all year round. With a little bit of protection and a little bit of training, we can have a long way to go on our accomplishments. Okay, so moving on. How am I looking on time? Like probably about 1 minute, right?
You got about 8 minutes.
Thank you very much. I like her. So again, at Red All Green Partnership, we evolve, we morph, we're constantly changing to meet the needs of the community. So one of the things that we've done at Red All to try to meet the people where they are is to create a line of products, right? And also to educate through newspaper articles and various periodicals that we're published in. And this is an article that I wrote some years ago for a local newspaper called the Call Post in Cleveland, which is an African American, but it's the oldest African American newspaper in the country. And again, in many of our urban core communities, we continue to suffer from high levels of disease. Cancer, diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure. But when you hear about diabetes, African Americans are usually always at the top of the list. So again, as we continue to offer solutions and help toward food security and food insecurity, we discussed this particular week, we examined diabetes as the fourth leading cause of death among African Americans. And the recommendations are always combined with the report. Okay, recommendations on this subject from the perspective of preventative healing through whole food and plant-based nutrition. consisting of measures taken for disease prevention as opposed to disease treatment. Here in America in 2015, African Americans are on average disproportionately affected by diabetes. 13.2% of all African Americans aged 20 years or older have been diagnosed with diabetes. African Americans are 1.7 times more likely to have diabetes as non-Hispanic whites. Diabetes is associated with an increased risk in a number of serious, sometimes life-threatening complications. The Black community experiences an even greater threat to health from diabetes than other ethnicities. Good and comprehensive diabetes management can help reduce your risk. However, unfortunately, many people are not even aware that they have diabetes until they develop one of its many complications. Current data predicts that African Americans will be significantly more likely to suffer from blindness, kidney disease, and amputations as a result of diabetes. As some of us were speaking earlier about the emerging existence of these dialysis centers around the country, and I was sort of kind of taken back by how many I was seeing in my city. But again, with things like this, we understand that complications of diabetes, kidney problems. And we also understand that nutritional deficiency is a major cause of diabetes. Not just the fact that you eat a lot of sugar, but it's the fact that your body is lacking certain mineral content. They said that you can stimulate pancreatic function through ingesting vanadium, the mineral vanadium. Chromium and vanadium, those two alone can help restore the body's function. It takes over 29 minerals to metabolize blood sugar. And some of the top two minerals are chromium and vanadium. And so those two are very, very highly suggested for people to ingest who don't have the ability to have a well-rounded, well-balanced diet. We have to supplement now. In 1936, there was a big meeting in our Senate. It was the 72nd session of our congressional, how do you say? Yeah, our congressional.
Delegation.
No. Here you go. You're right. No. There's a document called U.S. Senate Document Number 264, where it details an account of a group of doctors who came to our Senate in 1936 and gave a report about how America was in crisis. America was in crisis. There was an emerging, looming threat based on the erosion of our soil throughout America. Our topsoils were no longer able to support human health, that you would have to subsequently supplement your diet with minerals and vitamins in order to keep from acquiring any one of these myriad of nutritional deficiency diseases that were ensuing from a lack of nutrition. So again, the doctors, they told our Senate that if we didn't do something to stop this, if we weren't able to put minerals and nutrition back into the soil, we were going to be faced in America with a large amount of illness that we have no idea where it's coming from. But the nutritional deficiencies would ensue and create big, major problems. And so he said that, well, the farmers are able to fix it if we allow them the time and the resources to fix it. Well, we know that really didn't happen. Within the next 10 to 15 years, we saw emerging industries, being built from pharmaceutical industry, cancer, diabetes research institute. All these institutes were now blowing up because the health of Americans were diminishing at such a level because we were actually eroding in the same way in which our soils were eroding. Human health is based upon soil health. If you're not ingesting good, healthy nutrition from your soil, then you're not going to be able to ingest it into your body, right? For instance, if you don't have good, healthy soil, right? If we continue to destroy it through chemicals, the good, healthy bacteria that resides in the soil. The bacteria is responsible for being able to make certain minerals and vitamins available to us, right? But if we destroy them through the use of chemicals, then we don't have access to certain of those minerals. Then we stimulate the growth of our food with unnatural forms of NPK, which is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, to stimulate growth, right? We get pretty looking food. But if the soil was not strong, then the food won't be strong. So now we're eating empty food. It looks beautiful, Because most of it was literally created in the laboratory. Genetically modified to look beautiful, to grow nice, and to look like you really want it on your shelf. But at the same time, when you cut open that carrot, cut open that cabbage or that lettuce, and you compare that to one that was grown in good, healthy, mineral balanced soil, it's a difference of night and day. I can show you a carrot that was grown in good soil on one hand, and a carrot that was grown in some crappy soil on another hand. But they'll look identically the same, right? But when you ingest it, that's where the truth and the rubber meets the road. We have to continue to examine these things, you know. This is why we promote and continue to offer recommendations of how locally grown foods are always going to be the better choice for many of our urban dwellers. Because locally grown foods are oftentimes grown in real soil, real amendments, with real actual hands-on love and care. And those foods, when ingested, resonate that same nutritional well-being, that love, that care, and that life. There are many things that we do at Ridall, and we will continue to share and try to open up different things to engage and to come back, and also to invite you all to our site to come and witness many of the things that we do there. And in closing, because I know my time is up, another way in which we combat food security and food insecurity is the fact that we create a large number of value-added products. This is a line from our Urban Farm Doctors Superfood Energy Elixir line, where we have various things that we grow that we combine and create elixirs, and from those elixirs we make immune-boosting drinks, and we provide a lot of wellness initiatives in our community for the people so that they're not without any hope, without any help, without any love and concern. Thank you for your time and attention. I'll be open for questions when we finish. Thank you. For those of you on our website, for information, that was it.
All right. I'm not as good at walking and talking, so I'm going to just stand here behind the podium. So I'm Michaela Oldfield. I am director of the Greater Cincinnati Regional Food Policy Council. And our mission is to advance a healthy, equitable, and sustainable food system for all in our 10-county region through policy, systems, and environment change. So we are a cross-sector coalition. We work with growers, distributors, processors, eaters, and then also food waste. So working on closing that the loop of our food system. And we do work across a 10-county region. So Cincinnati is right on the border of Kentucky and Indiana. And so we have 10 counties across 3 states that fall into our footprint where we try to collaborate across. As I said, we do policy, systems, and environment change. As a JD, I'm kind of obsessed with policy change. I really like it because I feel like it really institutionalizes systems changes. However, as an organization, we have a lot of public health officials and have really seen that there is a need to work on policy and then the systems that exist for implementing that policy, and then the environments that exist that are where you're trying to implement the policy. And if you don't have all 3 working together, then you're not going to actually create meaningful change. So we really try to look and work at a high policy, systems, environment level. And then we work through impact teams. So we basically define targeted projects that we know we think we can accomplish that are going to have an impact, that have sort of a clear, not necessarily a very clear end date, but that we can sort of say, like, in 2 years, we're going to be, this project can be completed and we're going to like see progress. So I just thought I would go ahead and define when I'm talking about food security, what I'm talking about, because there are a lot of different definitions of it. And so I sort of mean the ability to access and use nutritious foods. So quite similar to what Mark just talked about. But to me, that is issues of accessibility and affordability and cooking knowledge, which I think are huge things that we talk about a lot when we talk about food security. But I also am very interested in sort of culture and cultural context of like what is culturally appropriate, and then convenience. So as a parent of a small child, the issue of convenience has become increasingly near and dear to me personally. And I have a lot more appreciation of how much time and how hard it is to cook when you have a job and a child. So our current work is first healthy soils. We are working on trying to build a coalition around the state around adopting more healthy soils policies and practices throughout the state and in our region. And so I actually am going to have to duck out at 12:30 to go meet with some soil health researchers that are on campus to talk about what they are learning about soil health and what this could look like. And Mark, we will have to connect after and talk about what this is beginning to look like. Then the two projects I'm really going to talk about are Farm to School. We have a regional Farm to School planning grant and are working with 4 of our school districts. And then third is healthy eating and healthcare, so really starting to dig into and try to address healthy food access and consumption as a social or political determinant of health. And then lastly, we are very interested in looking at sort of how do we prevent and reduce food waste, and then sort of recycle what waste cannot be prevented. So this is just an unfortunately blurry graphic that I have not been able to figure out how to make better, of sort of what our network looks like, of who some of our partners are and who else we connect to. If anyone's interested in this, I can send you the file, and I zoom in on it later, and so I just wanted to give you some background. So first of all, so we've got this Farm to School planning project. So the background of that, this current impact team is, in 2017, Green Umbrella was awarded a local food promotion program grant from the USDA, which provided funding for us to scale up the capacity of farmers in our region to meet institutional demand, while also promoting and trying to get institutions to purchase more local product from farmers through a couple of food hubs. And so that project is going really, really, really well. We're very excited, actually. One of our local food hubs just formed a formal partnership with a regional distributor that is also regionally owned and has access to major national distributors in terms of Cisco and GFS and some of these other organizations. So they're now able to easily plug really small scale farmers into the university supply chain system, which if anyone's ever worked on institutional purchasing is like, it's a key piece to unlock. At the same time, the Food Policy Council was working on a good food purchasing program with Cincinnati Public Schools. So this is a values-based purchasing program that came out of the LA Food Policy Council that asks schools to leverage their institutional dollars to try to change this food system so that suppliers will change their business practices and their operations. And it focuses on the nutritional quality of the food in the school, but also a valued workforce. Are people being paid fair wages? Are they having a safe work environment? Local economy, so what are the impacts on particularly small farmers? And then sustainability and animal welfare. So we had these two things going on in formally in 2019, CPS adopted the Good Food Purchasing Program and is the first city, or the first school in Ohio to have adopted it and is really leading the work. And so having had those two projects that were kind of moving along together, we saw that there was really a need to actually do some planning around Farm to School because there was some purchasing happening, but there's a lot of pieces of the overall system that need to be coordinated. Particularly, schools need to be coordinating demand to actually meet what farmers can grow, and if they can coordinate their menus, then it becomes really much easier for farmers to plant out the quantity of food that the schools will want and then to harvest it regularly. Like, it's not helpful if every single school in the region wants all the sweet potatoes the same week. Like, farmers need to be able to like harvest, well, sweet potatoes aren't the best example, but anyways. Huh? But then the other piece is we need to integrate what is happening in the cafeteria into the classrooms and into communications to parents, faculty, staff, so that people understand what are the social economic impacts of what's being done, what are the nutrition and health benefits, why does this matter? And so that needs to be done. And traditionally schools, the food service and the education and administration are very, very siloed and disconnected. They're very, very siloed at the state level in terms of the regulatory agencies. They're very siloed at the federal level, especially in terms of how funding flows to all of this work. And so there's a huge number of systems that incentivize like lack of communication between these groups. And then we also know we need to do some planning of regional infrastructure, so things like wash pack facilities, freezing facilities, that kind of stuff. So we have this farm to school grant. And I'm going to try to sort of share with you guys some of the numbers of like where our money is coming from and some of our challenges, because I think sometimes we have conversations within the food world about like all the great things that are being accomplished. And I personally hear about it and then I'm like, well, we can't, how do we do that? Like, how are they able to do that? So I like to try to share a little bit about how we're making that happen. So we have this planning grant. And we are working with 4 school districts. So Cincinnati Public Schools is a very, very large urban school. They have 60+ schools, and are all but 3 or 4 of their schools are community eligibility qualified. And so every child in those schools has access to free meals. Mount Healthy is a very small urban school district. Again, very, very high rates of free and reduced eligibility. And I think actually the entire community is CEP. I think they have 4 schools. So 2 very different sized urban school districts. Campbell County Schools actually is the entire county in Kentucky, very urban and rural, and so a nice diversity. And then West Claremont Public Schools is actually a fairly well-off suburban school district. And so we tried to get a range of population and incomes in different sizes so that we could figure out how to do some pilots and projects that if they work for one school, how do we replicate them and scale them across our region? And these were all schools that were pretty committed to doing some local purchasing already, so they were already kind of champions. So this is a slightly more zoomed in version of this. I'm assuming the slides will be shared out to people and you can look at it in more detail. But basically we have a whole array of educators and farmers and growers and food hubs sort of involved in this project. So where does this fit into food security, which is sort of the focus of today's panel? So one is this is a strategy for getting more local and healthier options into schools through the menu planning. So we see this as just straight up improving the nutritional quality of what's being served to kids. But it also means really educating kids in the schools on their nutrition and food systems so that they are actually accessing and eating this food that's being provided to them. So sometimes when we talk about food security, I think a lot of times we talk about the household food security, but for a lot of children, schools are a major point of food security for them. And so when schools close early on a weekend, or when your school has a snow day, especially on a weekend, this is highly problematic for a lot of children who otherwise probably would have gotten 2 hot meals. Maybe just 1 hot meal and a cold meal, but so school food is a very important part of the food security system as I see it. And then we also are going to be able to start doing some communications to parents and school staff and a lot of the people who are around these children who also influence children's eating habits. You know, children don't exist in a vacuum. And so how do we help parents and teachers reinforce and support healthy eating habits among children so that they are growing up healthy and strong? 5 minutes, okay. So quickly where we struggle on, or are struggling on some of this, school budgets, very, very tight. Their food service budgets, very, 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 very tight. And most schools have to operate independently their school budgets. Not a lot of buy-in from school administration as this is a curriculum priority. So we're working on that, trying to build those relationships. There's a lot of federal and state bureaucratic issues that make it really hard, even if people really, really, really want to do this. There's just too much red tape to do it. And then we, I think, have a lot of unleveraged partnerships that we have learned other regions have leveraged that we're looking into, especially hospitals. There's a lot of other parts of the country where hospitals have operated as anchor institutions on really driving some of the farm to school work within their community. And then farmer capacity. It's hard to acquire land. It's hard to grow produce and specialty crops. There's lack of good crop insurance, so it's very risky. And there's lack of expertise in how to manage all the diseases and pests. And so, like, there's all these factors converging to make it just, there's a lack of supply. So those are some of the things I think are high-level struggles that we're working on. So then the other major project we have going on is this healthy eating and healthcare project. And so where this kind of came from is we saw that there was a lot of ad hoc and kind of random investments happening in food as a social determinant of health and as a health-related social need, trying to address diet-related disease, but it's not integrated. So when you talk about food insecurity and food security, it's all those different things, right? Like, it's access, it's affordability, it's having the knowledge, it's having a cultural context, and then it's having the food that is convenient enough for you to eat it. And so we played a role in the community health needs assessment, which is a federally mandated planning process that hospitals and health departments have to go through. And then in 2019, we had an Integrating Healthy Eating and Healthcare Summit, which brought together about 65 people from the food world and the hospital and healthcare sectors to talk about what's already happening in our region and start to come up with an idea of where can we take the assets that we have and leverage them to fill in those gaps and have more of an impact. And this work was primarily funded by 2 local foundations. One is Interact for Health, which focuses on healthcare funding for sort of population health issues, and then the Yale Foundation is a sort of local, well-endowed foundation. And so out of that conference, we actually ended up hiring 2 Emerson National Hunger Fellows to do a study and write up a report for us on what is happening, what are the major challenges, and then it had 11 high-level recommendations for how we can actually improve collaboration in our region around this issue. And so we are not doing all 11 recommendations all at once, but what we are doing is sort of dividing up among some key partners, championing different pieces of those recommendations that we think have the highest need right now. So we have the Health Collaborative is a collaborative of hospitals in the healthcare sector. They're a trade association. They also lead the community health needs assessment process in our region and have a population health initiative. So they're already working with a lot of the hospitals around doing screening of social determinants of health, and so identifying when people are food insecure, and then helping those hospitals and healthcare providers know what the resources are. So when you do identify someone as food insecure, you're giving them the right resources. You're not just going, oh, that's nice, you have another problem, good luck. And so, because a lot of hospitals don't want to screen, a lot of doctors don't want to screen if they don't have something to give the patient to help them with the issue. And so they're working on that piece of the system. And then the Cincinnati Health Department is looking at how do we get more neighborhood scale distribution of really healthy produce. So a lot of distributors in our actually almost no distributors in our region will distribute anything that's not shelf stable to corner stores, and particularly in our food deserts. So even if a corner store wants to try to sell healthy foods or provide healthy food access, it's the liquor and the chips and the candy bars and the soda. It's the food that's just like toxic. So they're taking on that piece of trying to solve that distribution thing. And then what the Food Policy Council is going to be working on leading is trying to integrate our nutrition education and food access programs. So we know if people are provided access to healthy foods, sometimes they choose not to eat them because they don't have the skills to cook it, or they don't feel like they have the time, or whatever the challenges are. And so there's a number of different organizations that are tackling different pieces of this. So there's an organization called Le Soup that takes surplus healthy food, like produce and healthy food, and makes it into soup and freezes it. And I am out of time. Mm-hmm. And so, so how do we get that tied into like the food pantries and then the nutrition education and tie it all together. So that's what we're doing. That's that team. I think this project hits all pieces of healthy food, of food security. I'm just gonna let Alan go. Can I take one question in case I have to scoot?
Yeah, since you have to scoot, my question, what I could see on your graph, are you partnered with Extension or
Yeah.
Land Grant University with FCS, with Ohio Farm Bureau?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so we're building partnerships with the Ohio Farm Bureau. We've not been great at building those relationships, but we have partners from FNEP and Staff Ed that are actually some of the key champions of this nutrition education and access coordination.
Any natural resources, community gardens, magic gardens, that group?
We have the Civic Garden Center, which hosts, they are the ones that sort of host a lot of the Master Gardener Trainer, and we've got 4-H and OSU Extension from Hamilton County. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello,
Okay.
is this on? Hey, I'm Alan. You guys can call me Alan. What's up, OSU? Thanks for having us. I work closely with Michaela as part of the Green Umbrella Food Policy Council. I am mostly going to show you some pictures today. If you take a look around the room, you'll see that there's a variety of images. We like to use art and maps and infographics to capture people's attention, to talk about a lot of these issues that have already been mentioned here. We find that visuals and art and engagement happens more naturally that way. And this is just a beautiful picture to show you off. I've been using this image for years. But, you know, this is part of the dreaming that Mark was talking about. We have to be able to dream what we want in the future before we can go and make it happen. I'm super happy that my screen capture of the network that Michaela showed you did not end up blurry. I got really nervous when hers came up blurry. I'm like, oh my gosh, what happened? This is just zooming in on a very small corner of it. And so there were 3 questions that were posed to the panelists that we were going to be asked. And I just thought I would go ahead and answer them now through photos. So one of the questions is, how do you go about to try to solve some of these problems? And in the bottom left-hand corner, it's essentially through partnerships with cross-sector collaborators, communities, and stakeholders. And this infographic shows you that. It shows you the people, the organizations, and the institutions that the Food Policy Council is working with on those initiatives that Michaela just mentioned, impact teams. Yes. So that's how we're doing it. In terms of how I address what is local food, I'm just going to say 50 to 100 miles from where the eater is. Did the food come within that? Was the food processed within that? You can look at all those various levels. Part of this showcase is helping you to understand what is happening down in our part of the state, but I'm going to start at a state level. So one of the partners that we work with is Produce Perks Midwest, and this is showing you the counties that they are active in terms of, does everyone know what Produce Perks is? Glenn Sweeney, can you give us a very brief?
Yeah, Produce Perks is a program that enables people to use their SNAP card, and generally it doubles, I think,
Yes.
your SNAP purchase up to $10 or $20,
Yes.
depending on when it is in the program.
That's right, doubling people's access to fruits and vegetables monetarily.
At farmers markets in particular, right?
Yes, well, it started out at farmers markets and things like that, but Produce Perks has made huge inroads in terms of expanding their partnerships, healthy corner stores, things along those lines. This was actually my What Addresses Local Food. This is a map that was produced by Green Umbrella in 2012, showcasing some of the region's direct food access points. And here it's really interesting. They say 25-mile radius from Findlay Market. Findlay Market is one of the oldest and only surviving market houses in Cincinnati. We used to have anywhere from 6 to 9 of them being very active until you had kind of the rise of the modern grocery store. So it's fascinating that they, or whoever made this map, actually couldn't find the credits for it. This predates both Michaela and I's work on this. But the idea that Findlay is a central location in the heart of Cincinnati as kind of that epicenter. This is what Michaela was talking about in terms of the local food connection. So Creation Gardens is the larger Midwest partner that has now purchased Local Food Connection. The Local Food Connection is a really interesting story. When we talk about food hubs, there are many different ways you can try to create food hubs. Some people buy farms, hire farmers, and work to create their own kind of alternative food system. Local Food Connection said, yo, we got to truck 3 people in an app. And they're the connector, so that's why there's a truck on there, and the truck would literally drive around to various aggregation points. They're not in Indiana, but they are in Ohio and Kentucky. Farmers can then go to a local aggregation point rather than having to go to a big city. Truck picks it up, they bring it back to their distribution point, and then they distribute it, and this is a key, this is a gateway to getting local food in large institutions. Because, we got all these rules and regulations and restrictions. They are playing the game. They are connecting farmers directly with these larger food service providers. This is a key middle space, and it just got a little bump given that they were purchased by Creation Gardens, but they're, as far as I understand, still allowed to operate what they were doing. And then the graphs on the left, this is number of purchasers, suppliers, local food purchases, so the top one is dollars. So this is showing you in the last 5 years the growth in these 3 major categories. The amount of money, the farms and food manufacturers who are supplying, and then the customers, restaurants, institutions. I think, did they just drop households?
They're dropping.
They used to deliver to you. Talk about direct. But because they are now moving into this larger middle space, they are dropping that. But you have to grow with the times. This next map is showing you, so I tried to go from big to small, so that was state level, then regional level. This is now looking at the city of Cincinnati specifically. I worked with a handful of our local permaculturalists to try to map where all the current food forests are. So some of these are public, but some of these are also private. We also included park groves. So Cincinnati has an amazing park system, and we have groves of pawpaws that actually grow. So this is simply that piece of raising people's food consciousness of where's the food, because there's lots of edible stuff around here that you're taught, educated, socialized, brainwashed, however you want to think about it, to not see as food. I'm trying to open up your minds here a little bit. This next map is showing you if you're interested in Hamilton County and you want to raise chickens in your backyard. We have policies in place. I don't want a rooster waking me up in the morning, and neither do you. So a lot of these different municipalities say, you know what, you can have 6 chickens, they have to be layers, no roosters. This is showing you all of the localities in Hamilton County. The big red blob in the middle is the city of Cincinnati. You'll notice that is simply no roosters. So you can have chickens in the city, for example.
They do allow roosters.
They do allow roosters?
If you have land big enough to have 15 chickens.
Like probably an acre or more. To be able to categorize these was actually really, really tough because each municipality has like a slight variance. Hey, you can have 5 or 6. Here are your coop regulations. It has to be so far from your neighbor's fence, and on and on and on. That actually, to get these categories was a pain in the ass. This show of maps is part of a larger project called Edible City and Art Atlas, and we did a call for submissions. So this is someone who lives in Alaska who had made other maps before, and you see that they are bringing in some true art here in terms of that inter-area for what Cincinnati would look like, and then they identified landmarks. Do you know Lois's connection to Cincinnati? Yes, this is an artist in Alaska who we worked with over email to go back and forth, but this is her interpretation of some of kind of these either landmarks or really important points around food access. This is the Civic Garden Center, so this is the map that you see in the back there. Where are the school and where are the community gardens within the region? This map, there's actually 21 gardens that you cannot see because we had to zoom in quite a lot on here. And this map went through so many iterations to try to get it to what it was, because it is not easy to visualize information in such a way that people can look at it and go, oh, I get it, rather than keep looking at it. And then you have to read the fine print. And then you're tired at that point. Right? These next maps I'm going to show you, I work with schools, communities, but often neighborhoods to simply have the conversation, where are the assets? And so this is a very rough list of how this process happens. You get in a room and you talk with people. Who's not in the room is often the first question. What do you want to talk about? Sure, I'm here for food, but you know what? Transportation, access to kitchen, access to cooking. Maybe you just need some place for your children to be watched after school. All those other conversations have to happen in the process of having the food conversation. So this slide is actually taking the second bullet point. Produce Perks, which we talked about earlier, has been hired by Mercy Health System to work at Sailor Park, which is a very specific neighborhood in Cincinnati. It's often referred to as the Aleutian Islands of Cincinnati because it's like that neighborhood that's way off to the left. So this was a slide that I had set up for them, but it's really all about meetings, it's about generating data, brainstorming, and ultimately ground truthing. Get out, go for a walk, go for a bike ride, talk to people. You don't know what the corner store has? Let's go in and talk to the corner store, right? Let's go in and talk to the patrons and the managers. Figuring out faith communities. Do they have kitchens? They often have meeting spaces, but where everyone's talking about, well, where are we going to learn to do these cooking, nutrition, education workshops? So it's about identifying the assets, identifying the buildings, identifying the organizations, who's a nonprofit, who can apply for this grant. People are assets. That's why those networks, that's why both Michaela and I started out our talks with these network maps, right? People are assets. So it's kind of about reframing the mind, ABCD, asset-based community development. This is another map that shows Madisonville, which Madisonville is located in between the richest neighborhoods in Cincinnati. So Indian Hill, Kenwood, Marymount, and Oakley surround Madisonville, which is also a food desert, and the Madisonvillians, is that right? You know what I'm saying? The Madisonvillians, the people that live in Madison. The Delights. They had a program to try to get people to have gardens in their backyard. 500 gardens would have ring to it, it's only about 273, but come on, that's a lot. This map is working with Covington's west side, so because we're in Cincinnati, we also straddle the river, so we incorporate northern Kentucky into our region. And we got artists together in a room to draw these icons up, and then they were digitized by a graphic designer, but this is showing you the current assets in that very small sliver of Covington. This one is up here as well. This is looking at Walnut Hills. Walnut Hills is really interesting. Kroger moved out. New Kroger got put in down the street. All of a sudden this became more of a food desert. And there's been a lot of activity happening. This map and a couple of the other maps that I do, I work with students in a fruit and nut production class at Cincinnati State, and so we actually walk around the neighborhoods and identify what you can eat. And of course, some students turn in way better maps than other students. So I keep the good ones. They got an A on this. This is actually an art piece that was commissioned for the Edible City Project. This is showing you the Permaganic Eco Garden. The Eco Garden has been in existence since the 1980s. Eric Plowski of OFA helped to start it. Unfortunately, this is uncontested land, so in 10 years come back to me and we may be looking at the condos that they put in, but now we have proof and documentation that there was a food forest there before. And finally, looking to the future. You have to have the dream and the vision. Tri-State Trails is a different initiative with Green Umbrella, and the person who runs Tri-State Trails, Wade Johnston, has ridden his bike on all of the trails. The backdrop to this map is the trails in Cincinnati. The foreground, which is the purple icons showing the tree and the mushroom, is a food forest. Wade identified all of where the vacant land is, where we should and could be planting orchards. And this is what the project is. And these are our major partners. And thank you very much for the time.
Well, that's great to have Philip Paul after. That was good. Thank you all for having me here today. My name is Nicole Wasmuth. I'm here filling in for our senior advisor, Rick Carney. I'm an AmeriCorps Vista with the Halt Hunger Initiative, and I'm also a registered nurse at Kettering Medical Center. I got involved as an AmeriCorps because I'm passionate about childhood obesity, and when you really start to get into the research, you find out that food access is oftentimes a cause of childhood obesity. And I'll get into, I don't have a PowerPoint, but I'll show you our website where you can find a lot of the information of what we do here. And it's really great to go last because it kind of represents what the Halt Hunger Initiative does. We have one paid employee, which is our boss, Mark Willis, and the rest of us are Vistas. So there are the Halt Hunger Initiative, and in that, we don't have the capacity to do a lot, but we do like to fill gaps. So we partner with over 40 organizations to work on almost everything that you've heard about here today. From farmers markets, farm to school, there's just not much to follow up on except that in Dayton we have started Gem City Market, which is a co-op model. So the people in the community buy membership so that they own the grocery store model, and you can find that at gemcitymarket.com if you wanted to learn more about that model and how it started. And as partnership with Public Health, we started the Food Equity Coalition. So the Food Equity Coalition is here, and it's made up of 6 branches. The Food Insecurity section, which is mostly just the food bank, they kind of run that one. Vibrant Farms, this brings all of our local farmers together to kind of address what they need, make sure all of them are GAP certified, make sure all of the educational classes are connected with OSU Extension, and so on and so forth. Sustainable ecosystems, where we're looking at good soil and regenerative farming. I'm the co-chair of this Strong Communities branch, so that's making sure that people know why it's important to vote, why our soil is healthy, how can we grow gardens. You can own chickens in your backyard in Dayton now. And how do we make sure that the community is on these branches, right, so that we're just not writing prescriptions for people that don't know how to fill their prescription. And then there's another branch of Healthy People to make sure that those chronic diseases are managed properly. I don't know if anyone is familiar with Dayton, but one of our longest hospitals has been closed. Good Sam Hospital closed, and so I don't know what they called a hospital desert, but now there is a lack of health care services on that side of town. There's no clinic. It's a 4-minute extra drive from an ambulance to get to that location, to the closest hospital, which is Miami Valley. And if any of you are in the healthcare field, we know that time is tissue. So that's another issue that we're all, and all of those people that lost their jobs, you know, what if they were in walking distance and they don't have a vehicle, you know, just working around those issues. Thriving local economies is, they're looking at the food shed assessment, which some of these other groups have already done, and they've showed you their maps, and I've taken notes, thanks. They are doing a food shed assessment to establish what kind of production is happening. Most of Montgomery County and surrounding areas, they do high bulk items, which are being, so only 18% of Montgomery County eats locally because a lot of the crops are commodity crops. So cotton, corn, soy, and so we're looking at how do we feed the people that are growing the food, because they're growing food that they can't necessarily consume because they need to make money. And from this food shed assessment, they're looking at acquiring dollars to open up businesses. In the northwest side of Dayton is really, not only is it considered food desert locations, it's also an economic barren. Like, there are not very many businesses to have employment opportunities. So while we're looking at this food economy, it's important to prepare those who already live there to take on these businesses and jobs that will be forthcoming in the next 3 to 5 years, I imagine. And these are just definitions. And you can look at the food. This is at the Public Health Montgomerycounty.org if you're interested. I'll leave that up there for a minute. So the Halt Hunger Initiative is full of education, advocacy, capacity building, facilitating partnerships, and reducing duplication. So we like to identify who's doing what and how we can integrate partnerships and reduce duplication, because we find that, as you heard, all of us are doing very similar things, and that's great because we're all in a different location. However, when you start attending all of these meetings, you're finding out that 7 groups are surveying the same zip code 7 times. People are tired of filling out surveys. Why don't y'all talk together? Right? So really reducing that duplication where, you know, it's not of interest of anyone, it's not of interest of any organization to be duplicating services. We also do a lot of education. I work personally with a local STEM high school in DPS, and we did a food insecurity project where we educated the students on sustainability, food waste. We did the racial wealth gap simulation, which I'll show you some information on that in a minute. And it goes through 13 policies that have been implemented since 1865 and how it really affects the socioeconomic status of the white and the black population separately, which is, he's got his Hamilton redlining map back there, and the racial wealth gap really takes you through how we have went from redlining to food deserts as a part of policy. So that's why it's important to vote, which is also another map over here. Obviously, I like his maps. So we talk about the system inequalities, which are very similar to redlining. And so when you look at the redlining map, some of the language that they use are pretty, actually. How much time do I have?
About 8 minutes.
Great. I came in with no speech, so I just talked about whatever I wanted.
University of Richmond, at the bottom of that page.
I'm sorry?
Go to the University of Richmond, at the bottom of that page.
The bottom of the page?
On the previous page.
Sure. I just want to show you, so when we do our racial wealth gap simulation, we also we show screenshots of the actual document. So this is the breakdown of the map, so where you would find the locations. But here we go. So when we start looking at, okay, so this is Oakwood. Is anybody familiar with the Dayton area? So what is Oakwood?
Well, a very rich white neighborhood.
Rich white neighborhood. All right, so it's security grade A. So it says highly restricted, very high class residential, good schools, parks, playgrounds, transportation good protection, right?
By highly restricted, they're referring to racial covenants. Yes. So everyone knows.
Highly restricted, very high class. Racial covenant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what the restrictions are referring to.
So if we look at, so they're looking at detrimental influences, they're looking at the inhabitants, right? The buildings, the history.
What year is this from?
1937. So these were the documents. These were the documents that banks were kind of restricted to offer loans to. So if you were, like, if you see that map back there, the red area is what's told banks, like, don't invest here. This is a bad neighborhood to make an investment.
That actually meant you weren't eligible for federal mortgage insurance, which is why banks would not lend.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. So this is, we're still in A's, but so when I did at Thurgood Marshall High School, I did a screenshot of their particular location. here's one example that we use that it's not just racially, but it's also categorized by nationality. So if you look down at the infiltration type, it talks about a better type of foreigner, right? So like, who is that? Right. What a word, right? Right, so it's a small percentage of better class, German and Hungarian. So the Germans and the Hungarians were considered better class. Remember, these are federal documents, right? So this is why it's important to vote. Because we're voting for people that are sitting at the table making these documents. I can just do the racial LCAP while I'm standing here. We don't even have to go through it. So Italians were considered not favorable. And we're still in C. Sorry, it's a long document. Oh, there's some reviews. So this was Thurgood Marshall, which is on Hoover Avenue in Dayton, Ohio. So it says all of the same things, right? Good transportation, good schools, good playgrounds, nice houses, reasonable restrictions, but what's detrimental?
Necessary to drive. I was in black sex.
Right. Again, we're seeing it again, right? So this is what they mean when you hear the terms redlining. Like, I feel like redlining is used a lot, and a lot of times we become numb to hearing that word used. But I think it's really powerful when you see the document behind the map, right? The language that's so strong that we consider today was very federally followed. Anyway, so you find that. Somebody said go to something. Okay.
Nicole, you have 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Yeah.
What else have I got time now? So one thing that I didn't hear discussed today was food prescriptions. Has anyone heard of food prescriptions?
Yeah.
Great. Children's in Dayton, Ohio, that was something that, oh, I should probably give you background on the Whole Hungry Initiative. Who knows about Tony Hall? Ambassador Tony Hall? Oh, great, I'm glad I brought it up. Ambassador Tony Hall has been a congressman for the last 40 years or whatever. Well, he was a congressman, the 3rd District of Dayton, and then he became the UN ambassador, and he's been around 140 countries fighting poverty and hunger all across the world. He met Mother Teresa, and the thing he took away from Mother Teresa was do what's in front of you. He has a TED Talk that's on our website that you're welcome to watch. Sorry I'm so scattered. It's 15 minutes long, so it's longer than that. Right, so that's there. And what else did I take notes on? Homeful is a nonprofit in our area who has acquired $500,000 to start a mobile food market. And it has in place 14 stops in the food desert locations. A couple of policy changes that we've been advocating on were the reduction of dollar store openings. Dollar stores really, they market their services in lower income population areas, and so it drives out the desire for a grocery store to open there because a dollar store is already there. Front yards weren't allowed to have foods growing in them for aesthetic reasonings, so we've also advocated for changing that policy, and chickens to have chickens, so that's applicable in Dayton now. We are doing some food insecurity screenings at our hospitals now. Not all of them, but most of them, and the food bank has partnered with many of the hospitals to give away food bags. Like for those, because I feel like you said they did want to do the screening, because what do you do with the screening, right? So that's that's really what we do, is education, advocacy, and capacity building. So we've got our hands really in all of it to make sure that the partners are connected with the partners they need to be connected to. We're always willing to come and facilitate the racial wealth gap simulation. And we're a part of an IDEO grant, which is a Rockefeller Foundation grant to reduce climate change by the 1.5 degrees Celsius is the line in the sand, and we're on target to exceed 6 degrees Celsius. But with regenerative farming practices, we can reduce climate change emissions by 50%. And so we're on target to start implementation of some of this if we succeed beyond the semifinalists that we got for the grant.
So we have about 10 minutes or so left, so I want to get a chance to open it up to the audience. I'll ask a question or two if we don't have any right away, but question to the audience. Okay, here we go.
Audience.
I'm going to bring the microphone over there so we can hear you. There you go.
Alan, I was quite struck by your chicken graphic. Just the diversity within one county. And I'm pretty sure that a local representative in Cincinnati, Bill Seitz, sponsored House Bill 175 a couple sessions ago. Where do you see that movement? Do you see that we might be able to get a level playing field across the state?
Tell everybody what that was.
175 was dealing with urban livestock, and it set certain floors, benchmarks, so that we wouldn't have these exclusion zones. That, you know, food is a right, in my view, and the state legislature was looking at that to say, yeah, everyone should have a chicken in their backyard, and let's make the playing field level. And then other folks looked at goats and things like that. Again, I think it was in 2017 it was introduced, but I haven't seen. I was really pumped for it because, yeah, I work statewide, and that's difficult, you know, for me to know that in every 88 counties. So where do you see the way out of this hole?
As we all know, policy takes years. And of course, the push to even get the bill to where it was for consideration can take years. You know, Michaela had mentioned that the Food Policy Council tries to go after things that we think we can get done, gosh, within a 2-year period. I worked with her and several other people to revamp urban ag legislation that did finally get passed, and this is about compost size, this is about chickens, this is about bees, and this is just within the city of Cincinnati, which is right the large red spot that doesn't mess with the rest of Hamilton County. I can tell you that policy change at the state level makes it a little bit easier because that encompasses everything in the state, typically, right? The state has changed its policies around composting. Ultimately, we would need state level policies that support animal husbandry within reason, because as I said, I don't want to wake up to a chicken, right, to a rooster. But there's no reason that people can't have, the people that do have space for layers, or people that have space for bees, or whatever they want to do, if that is practical and within the rules of our health departments and our ag departments, then yes, we should be able to do that. At the meeting, before the meeting this morning, Mark was talking about how we basically all forgot how to farm. Well, we've forgotten everything else that goes with that, all the way through to the cooking and the eating, and of course the animal husbandry is a good piece of that. Thank you for the question.
Other questions in the audience?
Hi, my name is Jennifer Parsons. I'm from Dayton, so thanks for talking about Dayton. But now I live here and work at the Mid-Ohio Food Bank on our Foods Health Pharmacy program, which is healthy food connected through health providers. So exactly what you were talking about, so awesome. I would just like to know what your relationships are with your respective food banks, both in Dayton and Cincy and in Cleveland, what your work with them looks like.
Because I'm just a Vista, and no, I don't really, I don't necessarily have the conversations that my superiors do with the food bank, but I know the food bank is closely connected to what's happening at the hospitals, and they're financially tied to what's happening with Gem City Market. And the food bank has opened a drive-through, so every Friday you can drive through on food bank. Yeah, so, and I actually, so whenever new things happen, I like to experience them as a community member, right? And it was a very smooth process. One thing that we're doing in Dayton is working with the immigrant refugee community because it's so close to like the 70, 75 access, or maybe that's just my assumption. It seems that we have a nice immigrant refugee community. And one thing that a group is, Jen Burns leads, Access to Excess, and I'm getting off your question.
I have a question.
Sure.
Everyone, I think, touched upon this briefly, that you need to build a network, and that things are siloed, and activities are siloed. What's the biggest challenge you had in your respective communities in building the network? How did you get started on that, and what were the real obstacles?
Okay, thank you. Well, your network building is based on having access and knowing who your neighbors are, who the people are in your community or in your city that are doing similar things. And so we spent a few years really gathering data on where our those who would like, that participated in like-minded things, where they were located. They're not considered competition, but at the same time, those who are like minds doing like things. And so, after 2 years of finding out, we actually developed a way in which we could help them bring their produce to market. So, sort of almost in the spirit of the technology that can be used in, what's the name? I forget exactly. Blockchain. Blockchain technology, right, where we can assess who has what in the city and provide for those who need X, Y, or Z, from those who, who have it, who may not go to the market, because we specifically know who has certain things they need to go. So we're slowly developing that. I'm part of Mike, he's my head of distribution, so he's able to who has what and make deliveries throughout the week, basically.
Cincinnati and Dayton.
Yes, we're going to succeed or fail on the backs of whether or not we can work with each other. Basic things, don't burn bridges, because you never know when you're going to need that connection in the future. And the Food Policy Council graphic, it shows some of that, but it's also showing you who's not being involved in these conversations. And so our ability to connect with the people in power who are passing the laws, or the people that have dollars to help fund these things, is just as important as connecting with the people on the ground and hearing about what they need help with, or how you can partner in some capacity.
I came in long after the partnerships were already made.
How do you keep them going?
Yeah, so, and I think that's when, so under Commissioner Judy Dodge, she's had a food summit every year, quite a few years, 9 actually. So just to imagine, so the conversation started clearly 9 years ago, but this past fall was the first year we came out with a plan where everyone joined together to formulate a plan. And so just continuing to meet at the table on a regular basis, I think keeps that cohesion, because I think that again, we get lost in the overabundance of work each entity has to do on its own, and we forget that we're part of a larger system.
Okay, we are just about out of time, so I think we'll wrap things up here. Join me in thanking our excellent panelists. This has been a great series this semester, and thanks for contributing to that. I think you've really added to our discussion that we're having here in Columbus and in Ohio State on food security and health and community. So we appreciate hearing what's happening around the rest of the state. And again, join us in the fall when our new series will be on strengthening legacy cities in Ohio and beyond. And have a good summer. It's a little early to say that, but it's the end of our series.
Thank you.
Thank you.